Mr. Borrell, we are in fact approaching the anniversary of the war, and so my first question is from the beginning. I would like to ask you, to refresh in your memory the night from February 23 to February 24. So how did you find out that Russia invaded Ukraine, and what was your first reaction as EU high-ranked official and as a human being as well?
Well, 1 year ago at 5 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call, and when I heard the phone ringing, I imagined immediately that this phone call was to announce me that Kiev was being bombed. And this is what the voice on the other side of the phone tell me: Kiev is being bombed. And then I understood that the history was turning a page, and that we were entering into a dramatic situation. 1 year later, thousands of people lost their lives. Ukraine is being destroyed. Civilians being bombed. Infrastructures being completely destroyed. No electricity, no water. This is a tragedy for the Ukrainian people, but also for the Russian people. Tens of thousands of soldiers lost their lives, many more wounded. For Russia, it's also a dramatic situation for the Russian people. Not for Putin and their people, but for the Russian people, it's a sad story, and we don't know how long it's going to last.
We heard that from the beginning some EU member states had doubt that Ukraine is capable to withstand this, and they had the assumptions that Kiev and Ukraine generally will fall. May I ask you, which EU member states didn't believe in Ukraine, which vice versa believed, and to which camp you personally belonged to?
Well, nobody was expecting Ukraine to resist the way they have done. Nobody. Certainly not Putin. Putin was convinced that in a couple of weeks he was in Kiev. And certainly most of the Ukrainian friends were afraid that Ukraine could not resist. But the Russian army has demonstrated that the military was quite not as good as expected, and the Ukrainians much more courageous and ready to defend their country. And since the first moment, I thought that with economic sanctions was not enough. You cannot answer an invasion, a brutal invasion of a country, just by forbidding export or imports. That something else had to be done. And we did. We provide military assistance. And thanks to this military assistance, Ukraine has been able to resist. Well, they put much more than arms, they put lives, they put their courage, they put their will to resist and to become, to remain, not to become, they are, to remain a free and independent country. And that's what we have to do. And we have to do it quicker, more and quicker.
And this is right, that EU reaction was unprecedented from the beginning. So, I mean, indeed powerful sanctions, and also you cut off from Russian gas almost, you imposed oil embargo, and you also provided Ukraine with financial and military assistance. And nevertheless, Ukraine counts on more. So, in your opinion, what more EU can do for Ukraine if that's the case?
More of the same. More of the same. More and quicker. Economic support, military support, training their soldiers, humanitarian aid, diplomatic, reach out to the third people, to third countries in the world, sanctioning the economics of Russia in order to make them unable to continue finance the war. This is what we have been trying to do, and this is what we have to continue doing. I'm not going to invent the wheel. I just to have the stubbornness, the perseverance, the strategic patience necessary. If the Ukrainians resist, we have to support them. It has a cost for us, but much less than the cost that the Ukrainians, and sorry to say, also the Russian people are paying for it. This war is a disgrace for the whole world, more for the Ukrainians and the Russians than for us. But the whole world is paying a high price for that. Increases on the prices of electricity, energy, food, interest rates, inflation, low economic growth. Everybody in the world is paying the consequences of the decision of Putin of invading Ukraine.
Have you made some sort of assessment of sanctions' impact on Russia?
Look, last year was a good year for Russia because the prices of energy were rocketing. In July, August, we were paying the megawatt hour of electricity at 300 euros, 10 times bigger than before the war. And we were still depending on the Russian gas and oil. We were still buying and at the highest price, so they make a good amount of money. But this is changing because we are not buying anymore. Russia has lost its main client for gas, and we will not get another one. Russia is losing money. Look at the figures. The budget in deficit in January this year, 14 times bigger deficit than January last year. Trade, the income from oil is decreasing. Look, they are getting $40 for each barrel of Ural oil, 40, when Brent is at 80. Trade is down, public deficit down, and trade is also down. Big trade deficit. So the Russian economy will have a hit, but it's not going to have an overnight effect. It takes time, but it damages a lot.
For how long, according to your preliminary and approximate estimation, Russia will remain capable to conduct the war against Ukraine?
I don't have a crystal ball, but certainly the Russian economy will be weakened by the sanctions. They have lost a lot of, the military side, they have lost a lot of lives, but also a lot of material. More than 1,600 tanks has been destroyed, something that never could Putin imagine. But unhappily, they look like willing to continue the war because they are massing 300,000 soldiers in the front line, twice the number of soldiers that they had in the border before the war. And everybody is afraid that when the weather will be better, they will launch, well, they have started an offensive. They will try to break the resistance of the Ukrainians. And that's why we have to continue supporting them and keeping a door open for any peace process that someone could be able to trigger.
Ukraine would consider as a whole victory retaking under its control all the territories within its internationally recognized borders, I mean 1991. So Ukrainian president assumes that it would be possible even this year, I mean 2023. What is your assessment?
It's normal that Ukraine is fighting for its territorial integrity, and we support the territorial integrity. And the United Nations Charter, sorry, it's not us, it's not the Ukrainians, it's the United Nations Charter, which is based on the territorial integrity of everybody inside their internationally recognized borders. This is something which is the cornerstone of our international order, based on rules, and the most important rule is peaceful solution of conflicts, respect for sovereignty of the states, and respect for their territorial integrity. Certainly President Zelensky is asking for it.
How close the EU member states who are in possession of fighter jets are to making the decision in favor of Ukraine's request?
Well, we have to keep a balance between supporting Ukraine military and not being considered a belligerent, a participant in the war. We don't want the Third World War, and that's why we are not belligerent. We support one side, but we are not part of the war. And this creates a certain balance and certain precaution, and we have to study carefully what is the level of our support. But from my understanding, this support has to be as much as needed. It has been a debate about should we provide battle tanks? Yes, we are going to provide battle tanks. should we provide fighter jets? This is a request from President Zelensky here in Munich. He has been asking for it. And it's for the member states of the European Union to take this request into consideration. But by the time being, let's send the tanks that we have promised. Because the tanks are still not there. And they should be there quickly.
Has the EU already sketched out somehow the plan how to maintain the peace on the continent after Ukraine prevails, and how does the EU plans to deal with Russia after that? So simply, in a nutshell, what you can do with Russia?
Well, like, Russia will not disappear. Russia is a great nation. We have nothing against Russian people. They are suffering of this war too. They are suffering, they are losing lives, and they are losing economic opportunities, they are losing well-being, and Russia will be there when the war finishes. So we have to start thinking how this peace can be built and how the security in Europe can be rebuilt. And this will have to happen one day, the sooner the better. We have to imagine how. But Russia, who is going to represent Russia after the war? Who knows?
How do you think that's the case, or is the case of coming years or coming decades?
I don't know, frankly. You ask me a question that I am unable to answer. You know, by the time being, I have a duty, I have a job. It's to keep the unity among member states of the European Union, the 27 all together. It's not so easy, in order to agree on sanctions, on military support, on diplomatic activity. And this takes me busy.
From historians, we hear somehow the criticism of Treaty Versailles, which ended, in fact, the First World War. So I'd like to ask you if you agree with that, that at that time Germany was treated unfairly and it lost, in fact, 20% of territories. So would this scheme of Versailles Treaty work in case of Russia and Ukraine, or it will bring some damage, or vice versa, it would be useful?
Certainly the Versailles Treaty, to put an end to the First World War, was being the, maybe I can say, the basis for the following war. So the First World War didn't stop, didn't finish in 19, but continued until 45. And we had to learn from the history. But once again, we are where we are. We are in the middle of an awful war, where innocent people, civilians, are being killed, where Russia is trying to destroy a country because it's unable to conquer. So what we have to think today is how we can finish this war in order to respect the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of a country that has been invaded without any justified reason. And later we will see. As I said, we have to keep open the door to any peace process that respects these principles.